The cafe was silent except for the sound of wind clawing at frozen windows. Snow fell thick and relentless outside, burying Aspen Ridge under white silence, the kind of quiet that made everything feel suspended, every breath, every heartbeat, every small decision that would otherwise seem forgettable. No one moved when the man in the tailored coat cornered her near the back table. No one except Daniel Brooks. He was just a single father with grease under his nails and a son waiting at home. He didn't know her name. He didn't know her world. He certainly didn't know that the woman standing rigid in front of him owned half the city he struggled to survive in. But he stepped in anyway. Because some things don't require knowing. The storm had rolled in overnight, as storms in Colorado tend to do without announcement, without apology. By 6 in the morning, the main road through Aspen Ridge was buried under 8 inches of fresh snow, and Daniel Brooks was already scraping his truck windshield with one glove on and the other stuffed in his coat pocket. He had 30 minutes before he needed to drop Noah at school, 20 minutes if the roads were bad. He stopped at Winter Pine Café every morning because the coffee was good and the hours were early, and because sometimes a man needed 5 minutes of silence before the day took over. The cafe smelled of cedar smoke and dark roast. The woman behind the counter, Peggy, who had worked there since the place opened, slid his order across without him asking. He liked that about Aspen Ridge. People learned what you needed. He took his usual table by the window. That was when he saw her. She was seated near the back, half hidden by a structural column, a cup of tea going cold in front of her. Dark coat. Hair pulled back loosely, the kind of woman who was used to being looked at and had learned to make herself smaller because of it. He noticed her the way he noticed most things quietly, without staring. He noticed the man across from her more. Tailored wool coat, the kind that didn't come from any shop in Aspen Ridge. Jaw set hard, one hand flat on the table, fingers spread, a gesture that was less conversation and more containment. Daniel couldn't hear the words from where he sat, but he could read the shape of them. The woman's shoulders had drawn up toward her ears. Her eyes had gone to the table. Daniel set down his cup. He told himself it wasn't his business. He told himself a lot of things in the 3 seconds it took him to stand up and cross the room. Hey, he pulled out the empty chair beside her and sat down before anyone could object. He looked at the man, Adrian Cole, though Daniel wouldn't learn that name until later, and kept his voice flat and even. The voice he used when a customer was getting loud about a repair bill. She doesn't look like she wants to be here. Adrian had the face of someone who had never in his life been interrupted. His eyes swept Daniel from head to boots and back again, cataloging, dismissing. This is a private conversation. Sure. Daniel nodded. She can have it without you. A beat passed. The cafe had gone very quiet. Peggy had stopped moving behind the counter. Adrian stood slowly, buttoning his coat with the precise movements of a man performing composure. He leaned toward the woman just slightly, just enough, and said something low that Daniel didn't catch. Then, he walked out without looking back. The bell above the door chimed once in the cold air. The woman across from Daniel didn't move for a moment. Then she exhaled a long, careful breath, as though she had been holding it for some time. She looked at him. Her eyes were gray, the particular gray of winter sky just before snow. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "I know." He picked up his coffee. "You okay?" She looked at the table, then back at him. Something passed across her face that he couldn't quite name. "Yes," she said. "Thank you." He nodded. He didn't ask questions. He finished his coffee, paid at the counter, and went back out into the storm. Her name he still didn't know. The garage opened at 7:30. Daniel was there at 7. Northridge Auto Repair had been his father's shop, then his. Passed down the way, most things in working-class families were passed down not ceremonially, but out of necessity, out of love, and out of the quiet understanding that some legacies weren't made of money. The bays smelled of oil and cold metal, and in winter, the space heaters fought a losing battle against drafts coming in under the roll doors. He liked the work. He liked the way problems had solutions, the way a thing either ran or it didn't, and the way you could tell exactly what was wrong if you listened carefully enough. His wife, Claire, had died 14 months ago. Pneumonia that became something worse, faster than any of them had expected. She had been 34 years old. She had liked old films and terrible puns, and the particular silence that fell over their house after Noah went to sleep. She had called it the good quiet. Noah was 8. He had Claire's eyes and Daniel's stubbornness, which made for interesting mornings. That morning in the truck, on the way to school, Noah had been quiet through 2 turns before he said, "Dad, are you lonely?" Daniel had kept his eyes on the road. The wipers worked hard against the snow. "Where'd that come from?" Grandma said, "Lonely people forget to eat breakfast." A pause. "You forgot again." "I had coffee." "Coffee isn't breakfast." Daniel had glanced over. Noah was watching him with the focused expression he got when he was working something out, the same expression Claire used to wear when she was deciding whether to push a point. "I'm all right, bud," Daniel said. Noah accepted this the way he accepted most things Daniel told him, with temporary patience, as though filing it away for later review. The school drop-off was a slow crawl through snow. Daniel watched his son disappear through the front doors, small backpack, dinosaur hat, boots already soaked, and felt the particular ache that came with mornings like this. Not loneliness, exactly. More like the awareness of a shape that had been cut from a larger whole. He went back to work. He always went back to work. That evening, the house was warm from the old radiator that rattled and clanked its way through winter. Daniel made soup, the good kind, that took 3 hours, and they ate at the kitchen table with the snow piling against the window panes and Noah narrating an elaborate theory about how dinosaurs might have survived in Antarctica. It was, all told, a good evening. He didn't think about the woman at the cafe again until the next morning, when she was there. She was at the same table, same window seat, tea going cold again, as though she hadn't quite remembered to drink it. This time without company. This time with a paperback open in front of her that she wasn't reading. Daniel ordered his coffee. Peggy was watching the woman with the mild concern of someone who had worked a small-town cafe long enough to know when a returning face was actually a regular, and when someone was just coming back to the scene of something. He sat at his usual table. He didn't go over. She looked up once, found him, and nodded. Brief, acknowledging. He nodded back. They sat in separate silences for 20 minutes, which was, in its own way, a kind of conversation. On the third morning, she moved to a table closer to his. Not the same table one away. She had the paperback again. He had his coffee and the notebook where he sketched repair estimates. They didn't speak. The snow came down steadily, unhurried, and Peggy refilled his cup without being asked. On the 4th morning, she sat across from him. "Victoria," she said, and extended her hand. "Daniel." He shook it. Her grip was steady, warm. "I should have introduced myself sooner." She pulled her coat tighter, the cafe was cold near the windows, and wrapped both hands around her cup. It seemed strange to just sit down. It was strange, he agreed. But fine. She looked at him. The gray eyes again. "You don't ask questions, not my habit." She considered this for a moment with the expression of someone who hadn't encountered that particular habit before. Then she looked out at the snow, and something in her shoulders settled slightly, almost imperceptibly, like a breath let go. "I've been in Aspen Ridge 3 weeks, she said, working remotely. I needed to be somewhere quiet." He nodded. "It qualifies. I've never been very good at quiet. Takes practice." She smiled at that, a small, careful smile, the kind that seemed to surprise her a little. "What do you do?" "Auto repair. I own the shop on Frost Street. North Ridge? That's the one." She nodded, as though fitting a piece into a picture. "And you come here every morning?" "Every morning I can manage. My son's 8. Mornings are a negotiation." I imagine they are. They fell into a comfortable quiet again. Outside, a snowplow made its slow pass along Main Street, the orange light turning lazily through the storm. It was the kind of morning that asked nothing of anyone. He finished his coffee and said goodbye. She was there again the next morning. It became a pattern in the way patterns form in winter. Gradually, then entirely. They talked about small things first. She preferred films from the 1970s. She had strong opinions about this, expressed with an intensity that made him think she had considered the matter more than the subject probably warranted. He said his wife had felt the same way about that decade. Victoria said that was either a promising sign or a cautionary one, and he laughed for the first time in what felt like a long time. She was sharp in the way people are when they have spent years in rooms where being sharp was a form of survival. But she softened around edges he didn't expect. She asked good questions, not polite questions, but actual ones. She remembered what he told her. He told her about Noah's current fixation with prehistoric climate science. She asked 3 specific follow-up questions, and then said, with complete seriousness, that she had once funded a research grant in exactly that field. He didn't quite know what to do with that. 3 weeks in, Noah met her by accident. Daniel had brought him to the cafe on a Saturday morning. A treat, pancakes, no agenda, and Noah spotted Victoria at her usual table with the same paperback she never seemed to make progress on. He crossed the room and stood next to her chair with the direct confidence that 8-year-olds who are curious about things tend to have. "Are you my dad's friend?" he asked. Victoria looked at him, then at Daniel over the boy's head, then back at Noah. "I think so," she said. "We have coffee in the mornings. That's what he does with all his friends." Then yes. Definitely his friend. Noah nodded, satisfied with this logic. "Do you know about Cryolophosaurus? It's the Antarctic dinosaur. Most people don't know it." Victoria set down her book. "I actually do," she said. "Tell me what you know," Noah told her. She listened not in the way adults listen when they are performing interest, but actually with follow-up questions that made Noah's eyes widen with the particular pleasure of being taken seriously. Daniel watched from across the table and felt something loosen in his chest that he hadn't realized was tight. On the walk home, Noah was quiet for a block before he said, "She's nice." Yeah, she actually knew about Cryolophosaurus. That's unusual. It is. Another half block. "You like her?" Daniel glanced at him. "She's a friend." Noah made a small, unconvinced sound that was extremely Claire's. The snow had been falling all morning, fine and constant, settling on the sidewalk without noise. The town was very quiet. Daniel thought that maybe the good quiet wasn't always an absence. Sometimes it was a presence. He found out on a Wednesday. His mechanic, Callum Reyes, had come in late with a fast food bag and his phone out, which meant he had been reading something on the drive and probably shouldn't have been. He set the phone on the workbench next to a diesel filter and said, without particular ceremony, "Hey, isn't this that woman you get coffee with?" Daniel looked at the screen. Forbes. The photo was professional, taken in a glass-walled office with a city skyline behind it. The woman in the photo wore a charcoal blazer and had her hair pulled back precisely, and she was looking at the camera with an expression that was composed and a little distant, and entirely unlike the expression she wore, sitting across from him at a window table, drinking tea she forgot to finish. Victoria Hale, CEO, Hale Global Holdings. Net worth, $2.8 billion. Currently overseeing a $700 million expansion into renewable energy infrastructure across the western United States. He read it twice. "That her?" Callum asked. "Yeah." Callum picked up his food and walked away with the careful diplomacy of a man who knew when to stop asking questions. Daniel set the phone face down on the bench and went back to the engine he had been working on. He put the wrench to the bolt and turned it, and the metal gave cleanly, and he stood there for a moment in the sound of his own breathing. He tried to think through what it meant. He was not a man who drew dramatic conclusions. The work had trained him out of that. You diagnosed what was actually in front of you, not what you feared. What was in front of him? A woman who had been coming to a small cafe every morning for a month, who talked about old films, who had listened to his son explain Antarctic dinosaurs with genuine attention, who had never, in any conversation, mentioned that she controlled an empire larger than the GDP of several small nations. He knew why people didn't mention things like that. He didn't know yet what it meant for him. By the time he left the garage that evening, the temperature had dropped again, and the sky had gone the hard, clear blue of a February night. He picked Noah up from his neighbor's house, drove home in silence, and made dinner without really tasting it. He thought about two worlds and the distance between them, and whether any bridge was actually long enough to cross that gap without someone falling. She came to the garage on Thursday. He heard the door before he saw her, the cold bell above it, the sound of boots on concrete. He was under a truck, but he rolled out. Victoria was standing in the center of the first bay, looking at the organized wall of tools with the expression of someone accustomed to assessing environments quickly. She wore a coat that was not the tailored one she had arrived in Aspen Ridge with, but something heavier, more practical, borrowed-looking. She had not called ahead. He stood and wiped his hands on a rag. "Hi," she said. "Hi." She looked at him directly. "You've been distant this week." He had been. He had kept his responses short at the cafe, finished his coffee faster. He hadn't known he was that readable, and he found he didn't entirely like it, but part of him respected that she had noticed. "I saw the Forbes article," he said. She was quiet for a moment. "Callum showed you. He didn't mean anything by it." "I know." She pressed her hands into her coat pockets. "I wasn't hiding it. You weren't telling me either." "No," she said. "I wasn't." He leaned against the workbench. The space heater in the corner ran its low, constant hum. Outside, dry snow blew sideways in the mountain passes. "I've been trying to figure out what to say," he said. "Because I don't want to be wrong about what this is. What do you think it is?" "I don't know." "That's the problem." He looked at her. $2 billion is not a minor detail. It changes what everything means. Why? Because it means we don't live in the same world. She was quiet long enough that he thought she might leave. Then she said, "I've been in Aspen Ridge for 5 weeks. I came here because I was tired, not tired in a way that sleep fixes, but the other kind. The kind that comes from being the most important person in every room you walk into for so long that you can't remember what it's like to just be a person." She paused. "I sit at that table because it's the first time in years someone just sat with me, without an agenda, without wanting anything." Her voice stayed even, "And then you pulled that chair out and sat down when no one else would, and you didn't ask for anything after. And I thought." She stopped. "I'm not a project," Daniel said. It came out more sharply than he intended, but he didn't take it back. "I know that." She didn't flinch. "You're also not someone I owe an explanation to. But I'm giving you one anyway, because I'd like you to understand." He stood there. The snow moved against the windows. The heater hummed. "I need to think," he said. She nodded. She walked back out into the cold, and the door closed, and the garage felt very large and very quiet. Adrian Cole found him the following Saturday. Daniel was loading supplies into his truck in the hardware store parking lot when the black SUV pulled up and Adrian stepped out with the ease of someone accustomed to arrivals being noticed. His coat was expensive but still not quite right for actual mountain cold. "Daniel Brooks," he said. "Not a question." Daniel kept loading. "You've done your homework. Victoria has a pattern." Adrian stood at an angle that made the conversation feel like a meeting rather than an exchange. "She finds people. Sometimes she keeps them for a while. She's very good at making people feel chosen." Daniel closed the truck bed. "Is there something you want? I want to save you some time." Adrian's expression was measured, rehearsed. "I've known Victoria for 11 years. We were engaged for 2 of them. I know how this works. She comes somewhere quiet. She finds someone uncomplicated. She gets comfortable. And when the company needs her back, she goes. Daniel looked at him. And you're telling me this because? Because you have a son. Adrian's voice stayed even. I've seen what happens when she pulls away. I'd rather you hear it from me. The sky above the parking lot was iron gray. Snow was coming. Daniel could feel it in the drop of pressure, the particular stillness before a storm. You cornered her in a cafe, Daniel said. You put your hand on the table in a way that was supposed to make her feel small. I saw you do it. Adrian said nothing. I don't know what was between you two. I don't need to. But I know what I saw. Daniel opened his truck door. I think you should stay away from her. Adrian's composure shifted something behind the surface, giving way slightly, the way a road cracks before it separates completely. You don't know what you're walking into. Maybe not. Daniel got in. But I know what I'm walking away from right now. He drove home through the coming storm. He sat at his kitchen table long after Noah went to bed. The radiator clanked and hissed. The snow came down against the window in the way it did when the wind was right slanted, continuous, without urgency. He thought about what Adrian had said. He thought about Victoria's face when she talked about being tired. He thought about the gap between those two versions of the same woman, and which one he had actually come to know over 5 weeks of cold mornings. He didn't sleep well. But by morning, something had settled. Sunday mornings were slow. No school, no garage. Daniel made real breakfast eggs, toast, the coffee on a slow drip, and Noah appeared in the kitchen at his usual hour, still in his pajamas, carrying the book he'd been reading about Ice Age megafauna. They ate. Noah read. Daniel looked out the window at fresh snow covering the backyard, deep and unbroken, the kind that made the world look newly made. You're thinking about Victoria, Noah said, without looking up. Daniel turned from the window. What makes you say that? You get a specific kind of quiet when you're thinking about something hard. It's different from your regular quiet. Daniel poured more coffee. How long have you been cataloging my quiets? Since Mom. Noah set down the book with the deliberateness that meant he was paying full attention. What happened? Daniel sat down across from him. He thought about how to put it the way you explain adult complications to someone too young to have them, but too perceptive to be given less than the truth. I found out something about her that felt like it changed things, he said. And now, I don't know what to do with it. Noah considered this with his chin on his hand. What was it? She has a lot more going on in her life than I knew. A much bigger life. Does that make her a different person? Daniel looked at his son. Like, does she do different things at the cafe? Does she listen differently now that you know? No, Daniel said. Then she's the same person. You just know more about her now. That's not the same as her being different. Noah picked up his book again. Also, you told me that brave people don't walk away from hard things just because they're hard. You said it about the broken transmission. But I think it counts for other stuff, too. I said that about a transmission? After you had to call the customer and tell him it was worse than you thought. You said brave people say the hard thing and let the other person decide. Noah didn't look up. I write things down. Daniel looked at his son for a long moment, this 8-year-old with his mother's eyes and his quietly devastating logic. When did you get so sensible? He asked. I've always been sensible. You just forget because of the dinosaur thing. Daniel laughed, a real one, from somewhere uncomplicated. He sat with it for a moment. Then he got up, went to the hallway, and found his coat. Where are you going? Noah called. To say a hard thing, Daniel called back. A pause. Then, good. He knew where she was staying, the Ridgeline Inn on the north end of Main Street. The only place in Aspen Ridge that had reliable, quiet, and reliable internet both. He had walked past it a dozen times. He had been resolutely not thinking about it. He parked at the end of the block and walked. The snow had stopped sometime in the night and left behind the particular stillness that follows a heavy fall, the muffled quality of sound, the way every surface was softened. His boots crunched through the untouched stretch between his truck and the inn's front steps. She was sitting on the porch. That surprised him. She was bundled in a heavy coat and a scarf that looked like she'd found them at the back of a closet, functional, unlabeled, and she held a mug of something and she was looking at the street. She looked like someone who had gotten up early because sleep had given up on her. She saw him coming and she didn't move. He stopped at the bottom of the steps, looked up at her. "I talked to Adrian," he said. She didn't react visibly. "What did he say?" "That you have a pattern. That you come somewhere quiet, get comfortable, then go back when your company needs you. Do you believe him?" He thought about it honestly. "I think he told me the worst possible version of something true. I think that's different from a lie and different from the full truth." She held her mug with both hands. Steam came off it in the cold air. "The full truth," she said carefully, "is that I have left places before, because there was always something that needed me more than the place did, and I told myself that was the job." She looked at the street. "I told myself a lot of things. What do you tell yourself now?" She was quiet for a moment. Then, "That the job will always need me, and that what I had at that table every morning for 5 weeks, I haven't had that in a very long time." He climbed the first step. "I'm not looking for someone to rescue us. I know. Noah and I are fine. We have a system. I know that too." But he stopped. He was not naturally a man of speeches. He found it easier to show things than to say them, but this seemed to require saying. "What happened at the cafe when you sat down at my table, I don't think that was nothing." She looked at him. "I think that was two people deciding something," he said, "even if we didn't say it that way." She stood up from her chair. She came down the steps slowly, carefully, stopping one step above him, which put them at eye level, close enough that he could see she had been awake for a long time. "I don't want your world," she said quietly. "I want you, if that's something you want to figure out." He reached up and took her hand, the one not holding the mug, and held it. Around them, the snow was deep and white and unbroken. The town was very still. Somewhere up the street, a door opened and closed in the cold morning. The air was sharp and clear. They stood there for a while, on the steps of the Ridgeline Inn, in the aftermath of the storm. When he turned to go back to his truck to collect, Noah left with a neighbor. 30 minutes promised, Victoria said. "Bring him, if you want." He looked at her. "There's a diner 2 blocks over that serves breakfast until noon," she said. "I've been going alone." He pulled out his phone and dialed. Noah picked up on the second ring. "Yeah? Get your boots on. We're having breakfast out." A short pause. "With Victoria?" "Yeah." A longer pause, carrying the particular quality of someone trying very hard not to sound triumphant. "Okay. That's fine. I'll be ready." Daniel hung up and looked at Victoria. "He's thrilled," he said. She smiled, not the careful, small smile from the cafe, but a fuller one that changed her whole face. "I know," she said. "I could tell." 6 months later, the snow was gone. Aspen Ridge had moved into the tentative warmth of a mountain summer, the kind that arrived politely and didn't overstay. The aspens along the ridge road had leafed out in a pale green that looked almost translucent in the afternoon light. Winter Pine Café had been renovated in April. It happened quietly. Without announcement, a new reading corner in the back, with low shelves and 2 good chairs and a lamp that made the light warm in the evenings. Better insulation on the north wall, which Peggy said she had been requesting for 3 winters. A small lending library for the town's children, stocked with titles ranging from picture books to early chapter fiction, with a handwritten sign that read, "Take one, leave one, read often." Nobody made a big deal of it. Peggy had said thank you once and meant it, and that was enough. Victoria had not bought the town. She had not established a foundation bearing her name or arranged a public ceremony. She had found 3 specific things that Aspen Ridge needed, the Café renovation, a repair fund for the elementary school gymnasium roof, a small investment in the local land trust that had been quietly failing, and she had addressed them, carefully, deliberately, without theater. She still worked. Her calendar remained brutal. There were mornings when she was on calls before dawn, and evenings when she was reviewing contracts in the inn's small sitting room while Daniel and Noah ate dinner without her. She had never pretended otherwise. But she had also spent 2 weeks in June teaching Noah to identify cloud formations by shape. She had argued passionately with Daniel about a 1,974 film director for 45 minutes on a Sunday, and then conceded, graciously, that he was right. She had sat in the stands at Noah's school field day with a borrowed folding chair and cheered with unreserved enthusiasm for a child who was not hers and who had, somewhere along the way, become important to her. They were figuring it out, slowly, imperfectly, without a blueprint. One evening in late June, the three of them sat on the back porch of Daniel's house, the small house on the west side of town, the one with the old radiator and the drafty windows he had been meaning to replace for 2 years. Victoria had brought takeout from the Thai place in the next town over. Noah was eating and reading simultaneously, which was technically against the house rules but which Daniel had stopped enforcing on evenings when the light was this particular shade of gold. "Can I ask you something?" Victoria said. Daniel was looking at the mountains. The light was doing something extraordinary to the ridge above the tree line, turning it briefly amber, the way light in the late afternoon sometimes found exactly the right angle. "Sure," he said. "Do you think this is strange, the way this happened?" He thought about it genuinely, not quickly. "Strange is the wrong word," he said. "Unexpected, maybe. And unexpected things usually are." She looked at the mountains. "I've made a lot of decisions in my career by being very certain very quickly. How's that working for you?" She laughed, a quiet laugh, but real. Better in some rooms than others. Noah looked up from his book. "You could just say you like it here," he said, with the calm directness of someone who had not yet learned to be indirect. Victoria looked at him. "You keep coming back," Noah said. "That's what liking somewhere looks like." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "Yeah," she said. "I suppose it is." The light moved across the ridge. The aspens at the edge of the property shifted in a small wind, pale and constant. Daniel's coffee had gone cold, and he didn't get up to reheat it. The evening settled around them the way good evenings do, without effort, without declaration. He thought about something he had once said to Noah in the truck, in the snow, about the kind of quiet that was actually a presence. He thought he was sitting in the middle of it right now. Sometimes love isn't about escaping winter. It's about finding someone willing to stand in it with you and then, when the season turns, to stay anyway.